Welcome to this episode of Growth Science. Today, we're lucky enough to be joined by Vince Moreau, founder and CEO of ScaleCrush. Really excited to speak with Vince. He's posted some really interesting content on LinkedIn, so I'm excited to get a deep dive here. Vince, to kick us off, maybe you could just talk a little bit about your background and your company.
Yeah, hey everyone. I'm happy to be here. So I'm Vince. I'm the founder and CEO of ScaleCrush. You said it. We are a B2B marketing agency, and we cater mostly to tech and SaaS companies. Um, and my background, well, I'm going to tell the same story I tell every time on these things. Is my background has nothing to do with business or marketing. I actually have a master's degree in French medieval literature.
Oh, wow.
And I spent a couple years in Canada to start a PhD in French medieval literature, which I dropped out of because the employment perspectives in the field weren't that great. And so when I came back, because I'm French, I came back to France from Canada. I went looking for a job, and because I was like a humanities guy, I found a job in content for a very for a small company that kind of invested in content marketing and SEO. I then worked at an SEO agency. I learned SEO on the spot, and then I gradually kind of created my freelance business, which I turned into an SEO agency, and now I turned into a proper. We do SEO, content, and product marketing, but maybe we'll dive into a little bit better, a little bit more into all of this.
All right, very cool. Great, great. So you have good experience here. The first question I always like to ask is, what do you see as some of the key factors to growing a company?
At, what kind of company are we talking about?
Well, we focus on B2B SaaS, so I think most of our
Okay. If we're talking about B2B SaaS, I think one of the factors that people underestimate is positioning, but I'd even say it's messaging. So something I see a lot when I talk to companies, or just when going through the web and finding products for myself, is that most companies do not think of marketing strategically. They think of marketing as an ensemble of tactics.
Mhm.
I have a pretty good analogy for this, and we actually have this on our website if people are interested in it. We created a comic where you can see a monster that is made up of different parts, like a Frankenstein monster.
Right.
And yes, before people say this, yes, I know Frankenstein was not the name of the monster. um, and basically what teams do usually is, and this is due to the nature of a startup and either bootstrapped or low funding company, where they have to do stuff on a low budget at first.
Right.
And because they have to do stuff on a low budget, they'll do the product hunt launches, the Slack communities work, and finding here and there a little bit of founder-led outreach on LinkedIn, etc. And they grow off of this, but this is not a very solid foundation. What happens is they try to stitch all these tactics together into something that they call strategy. And at some point, it kind of takes life. It is born, and it starts eating at the actual marketing work. And I think that when I say positioning and messaging are so important, is because yes, you can talk for hours on how much of your budget you should put on Google ads versus LinkedIn ads versus SEO versus cold outreach versus LinkedIn outreach versus whatever you want to call it. But if you don't have, and I'm not talking, I'm working off of the assumption the product is good.
Right. Right. Right.
But if you don't know the story you have to tell and how to tell that story, then you can do all the LinkedIn ads in the world. You can have the best reach and the best optimized campaign and all that stuff. It doesn't really matter, right?
Right.
And so I think the key factor is here when it comes to marketing. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Absolutely. And so working with B2B SaaS clients, how do they tell their story effectively? Like, what would that look like?
So how do they do that? The answer is most companies do not.
Mm-hmm.
Which is also why you have so many people. And if you're in the LinkedIn crowd, you've probably seen the success that Anthony Pieri has had with this product marketing thing, which is exactly what they do, is only messaging and homepage messaging and landing page messaging.
Right.
Most companies do not do that.
Mm-hmm.
The reason they don't do that most of the time is they're neck deep in their own stuff, and they
Right.
don't realize that whatever they say is not connecting with
Right.
people. When they do it, the way what it looks like for us, at least the way we kind of preach it, is not I mean, we do it the traditional way, like looking at features and capabilities and benefits and all that stuff. But I think the most important part that companies are missing is the story.
Mm-hmm.
And when I say the story is people, if you have a product, B2B SaaS or otherwise, and it could be professional services, it can be anything. People buy because you solve a problem for them.
Mm-hmm.
Whatever that problem is, right? People buy because you solve a problem.
Right.
So now that you know the problem that you solve, and most companies actually do not. And I have a few examples of companies who do not versus companies who do, if you want to go into that rabbit
Yeah,
hole.
yeah, that'd be terrific.
Most companies do not know the problem they solve.
Right.
And so there's the problem you solve, and there's the why people buy.
Mm-hmm.
Because sometimes you feel people buy for a specific reason,
Right.
but they actually buy for another one.
Mm-hmm.
For example, some people buy SEO because they want to be first. They don't want to grow their organic traffic or whatever. They want to be first. They want to be at the top. This is the emotional factor into buying SEO.
Right.
If you realize that this is why people buy from you, in your crowd, in your niche, in your market, your portfolio of clients, this is how they behave, well, you can tailor your marketing to that. So you've got your problem on one end, and you've got your solution to the other. Now, how do you bridge the gap in between those two things?
Right.
Right? This is the story. This is what I call the narrative, which is at the intersection of what the market wants, what the market needs,
Mm-hmm.
and your actual product. And in the center there, I have a cool Venn diagram that looks way too complicated for its own good, but it sits at the center here. It's the story that you're going to tell. To build that story, which I guess is your subsequent question, to build that story, you just need to talk to people and understand actually why they bought without kind of without influencing them one way or the other. Understand why they bought, understand the emotional state, the triggers, the pain, etc. It's just basic customer research, which most SaaS companies are not doing at all.
So true.
And this goes further than just, yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
Oh no, I was just gonna say, how do you present a compelling reason for them to choose you over another? So obviously they're aware that they have a problem they need to solve, but how do they how do you make them, I guess, emotionally connect to choose, this specific product rather than another one?
Well, I guess it's a case by case thing. There is no tried and true answer to that. I guess I'm a big believer in the fact that if you show that you understand the problem, you're
Mm-hmm.
already halfway there,
Right.
right? So for me, I'm an agency owner, right? So if someone comes in and says, they cold email me or whatever, or they talk to me at an event and they say, oh, I can bring you 60 meetings per week and that
Right.
will fill your calendar and you'll get a lot of deals. I'm an agency owner.
Right.
60 meetings per week is not only is it unrealistic, but this is not what I need. An
Right.
agency needs what? 1, 2 clients per month? And at
Right.
1, 2 clients per month, if your LTV is high, you're growing really fast, right? So if a guy comes in and says, look, this guy was doing, I don't know, maybe a 40K MRR, and within 18 months, we took him to 7 figures. Now I'm listening
Right.
because that is realistic. That is something I want to achieve. That is 18 months is a decent window in which I think you can double your agency's revenue for sure if you've got the right system, et cetera, et cetera.
Right.
But you can see that understanding the problem, understanding the market already gets you halfway there. Because if
Right.
someone DMs me 60 meetings per week, or we can get you even 10 meetings per week, I mean,
Right.
right? If someone DMs me that, I'm like, I don't care. But if someone DMs me something that is really in line with the exact problem that I have, well, then I'm listening, right?
Right.
So I think that's part of the emotional connection as well. Showing that you understand the problem is
Right.
very important.
Right. Right. Interesting. Do you have any methodologies you use to gather customer, insight and feedback to be able to define that messaging?
Yes, we do. So we do two things. And this is also because I'm in an I do that for clients, so clients pay me to do this.
Mhm.
I would probably tell a different story if I were in-house. So if someone is in-house and is trying to implement this, then there may be other ways that I would also explore.
Right.
But because most of the time we won't get access to, all the sales calls and all the support calls, and we can't set on sales calls, on 2 sales calls per week or whatever, which would be a great way for an in-house marketer to get all that information. But what we do is we do two things. We do customer interviews, which is easier said than done, because you need to run your interviews in a way that does not influence people and still gets you the answers that you need. Because I talk to so many people who say, oh, yes, we run customer interviews or clarity calls or whatever they want to call it. And then when you see the notes and you watch the calls, you're like, that person does not have any idea, is not coming in with a plan, etc. So that sometimes we also do training for their team to do that in-house. Can I teach them how to structure your interview, which questions to ask, how to plan for it, when to talk, when not to talk, etc. We do that, so all the interviews, and this is very important for anyone trying this at home, summarize your interviews the same day or the next day. Like,
Mhm.
don't wait for 5 or 6 or 7 days, because you won't have the same feeling about it than shortly after. And the second thing that we do, which is much easier, and I don't see a lot of companies doing, is we scrape reviews online. So if you have a G2 page, a Capterra page, software review page, we scrape all of that. We use AI to put it in a more digestible form, PowerPoints and stuff, in a spreadsheet, and analyze that. And that's two sides of the same coin.
Right.
The customer interview side is the side where we try and gather the emotional state, emotional process. Of course, the intricacies of the buying process, but usually the sales team knows that really well. The client can tell us that. What they usually can't tell us is, why did people actually buy from us, right? Or why did people actually buy our product?
Right.
And the reviews, on the other hand, they tell us what people use the product for and what they liked and disliked about the product, which you can also loop back into your marketing and sales process.
Right, absolutely. And it's also, I think, very helpful because you can see how people actually talk about your product. We have instances
Mhm.
where we go in with a client and say, okay, you're focused on this sort of broader category, but when you actually start looking at how customers are talking about it or prospects are talking about it,
Yeah.
we're actually talking about it in a different way. And so that can really help inform your messaging as well.
That's exactly the case, where I say, I use the term misalignment. I think most companies have an alignment problem. They're misaligned with the market.
Right.
Um, and I have an example. We still work with a company that has an idea management software. So, they work with big corporations that have a lot of, that want to implement that bottoms up feature where, if they have a certain number of stores and they want to display, employees can log in and say, oh, we should do this, we should do that. Maybe if we had that kind of arrangement, that kind of hardware, whatever, right? And then they can vote on ideas, cluster them, whatever that does.
Right.
Every every company in that category describes themselves, markets towards innovation. Like, we are innovators because it's ideas, and ideas form innovation. Very, I can't find the word, very uplifting
Hmm.
marketing, very aspirational marketing. And then we ran interviews and tried to understand why people actually went looking for such a product, what were the underlying problems, but also, how they went looking for it. And turns out people use that for employee engagement.
Right.
It's HR teams who want to keep employees in by just giving them a voice.
Interesting.
They're not into an innovation mindset, like absolutely not. And so when an HR person goes like, oh, I need an idea management software, and they type in idea management software, they land on Capterra, they see an ad, or they land on search, and then they go to your website, or they read a blog on how to do a brainstorming session, that kind of thing. They
Right.
land on your website, they find your company. This is the hardest thing to do for any companies, to get visibility.
Right.
And at this point, you tell them we are an innovation software, and
Right.
they're at the door,
Right.
because that's not what they're looking for, right?
Right.
And so
And
that's the kind of misalignment that happens all the time.
And that's great. And you actually read my mind. I was going to ask you for an example of this, but were you able to find that actually like updating their messaging, or it doesn't need to be them, or maybe another client, were actually changing their messaging to be more closely aligned with how people were looking for the product and the need that they had, where that was actually able to make an impact on in terms of the company's growth?
Yeah, so this is a tough question to answer, because this is not the kind of thing where you just push one button and everything stays the same. So you always do so much at the same time.
Yes.
So it's tough to say, this is what pushed it and this is what worked, etc. But yes, we've seen. I can't give you any specific examples.
Right.
I don't have any that come to mind. But we've seen instances where you change, you do a second round of interviews, and then you see that the issues that people had, maybe they don't have the same issues. It's not exactly the same. And by the way, I mean, if I were in-house at a company, I'd do that all the time.
Right.
All the time. I'd be on interviews, etc. Because if you think of it as a one and done, let's do a messaging project for 2 months or 3 months, and then never touch the website again for 5 years. And obviously, the market's going to change, the competition's going to change, your product's going to change. So this is an iterative process. It's supposed to be constantly evolving.
No, that's it. And I think that's great. I mean, what we find with clients is a lot of times talking about that sort of Frankenstein's monster that will lead a company like they'll drive growth, but eventually they're going to plateau because there's just only so much of that low-hanging fruit they can capture. And to really
Yeah,
take it to the next level, it really is about thinking about things like their messaging and their vision. So I think that's a terrific point. And that
I mean,
is often
you brought up the plateau, but if you look at our website, this is exactly the stuff that we identified, right? And this is the problem that we're trying to solve: is you've done all that stuff, you're still doing all that stuff, you're still spending all that money, but for some reason for the past year it hasn't changed anything.
right,
So how do you go forward from there?
right,
And what we tell people is, and this is kind of a tough love approach that some people resonate with, some people hate it, is what I tell people is, you haven't been doing any marketing, you've been doing campaign management.
right,
And those are two very different things.
right,
Because hiring agencies and coordinating agencies who do, one your Google ads, the other you cold outreach, the VA that does your LinkedIn organic, the other agency that does your LinkedIn outreach, that is not marketing.
right.
That is campaign management. I'm
Hmm.
not saying one is better or one is better than the other. That's not the point. I'm not saying marketing is the holy grail and all these peasants that are doing campaign managements are really bad. It's saying these are two very different things, right?
Right, right. No, that's a great point. So Vince, I found you based on a post you wrote about demand generation, which is I've seen a number of things that have gained a fair amount of traction around demand generation. I think it's a
Yeah.
really important conversation. So I'd love it if you would just sort of summarize your view on this, because I think it's important to get this out there just so people have an understanding that just because people are saying demand generation doesn't necessarily mean like it's correct.
Yeah. So before I go on down that rabbit hole, I want to make a very important precision. And this is also being, having that humanities background.
Uh-huh.
Um, I think, okay, this is going to get a little bit philosophical if you want
No problem.
to bear with me for a second. Language is a representation of the world.
Hmm.
And because it's a representation of the world, by design, it is a false representation of the world. We cannot describe the word perfectly, so not a 100% accuracy with
Right.
language. What that means is that the way we use language to describe the world shapes the way we think about the world,
Hmm.
right? And the corniest example I have of that is like the legend about that Inuit tribe having 50 words to talk about snow, right?
Okay.
Because snow is so important in their universe that they have, the snow that is in this and that state. You see that language is very important at shaping the way. It's a reflection of the way we see. It's both a reflection of the way we think about the world, and it shapes the way we think about the world. If I describe slavery as free labor,
Right.
it's not slavery anymore, right? Um, so this is important on a grand level, but it's also really important for the demand generation and demand creation thing. My basic stance is that demand generation does not exist. Or to be more nuanced, the only way to create demand for something is to create a problem. And so that's something I just talked about is uh, the when people buy something, they buy it because they have a problem. It may be a real or it may be a fake problem. But the only way to create demand is to create a problem. And
Hmm.
we have multiple examples of demand being created this way. For example, in the 50s, women did not wash their hair more than once a week. And
Right.
then shampoo manufacturers started bombarding them with ads saying, if you don't wash your hair every day, you're filthy. And so people just started washing their hair every day. What happened there? Did they create demand for shampoo? Yes. But why? Because they created a problem for women or anyone else who washes their hair. They created a problem saying you're going to be filthy if you don't do this,
Right.
right? Um, so that's on the kind of ethical end of the spectrum. In the less ethical kind of the spectrum, you have Coca-Cola putting cocaine at first,
Right.
which there is no cocaine in Coca-Cola anymore, and then now sugar to get people addicted to their products. And then on the totally unethical side of the thing, you have obviously tobacco companies
Right.
who create demand because they know it's an addictive product.
Right.
Apart from that situation, demand cannot be created out of thin air. It cannot be generated. There's no way for people to magically want a pizza oven that also functions as an alarm clock,
Right.
right? It, I can build it, can be really great, have great design, be really cool to use, but no one wants it and there's no way for me to sell that stuff because people don't want it.
Right.
And um, and I know that this kind of challenges because people are going to say, yes, but look at this specific company, and it's usually Apple. They created demand for the iPhone.
Right.
Well, first of all, that's factually incorrect because Blackberries were doing basically the same thing. And the iPhone, you know, they didn't create demand. They created a product that already had demand, which is like an all-in-one to gather all your things. And there's a really easy way to prove that is if I told you right now that I have a product that's capable of transporting you long distance in a fraction of a second, completely safely and free of charge, would you buy it?
Yes.
Yeah. So there is demand for teleportation. So if you create a teleporter right now, there is demand for it. Because
Right.
the second example is always like, oh, Henry Ford said, if I ask what people wanted, they would have told me to build a faster horse or whatever. But the demand for faster transportation was already there, right? It it just yes, the solution did not exist, but the demand was there.
Right.
And you cannot create demand. It just I haven't seen one compelling argument towards that idea.
Right.
And if you want to believe it, believe it. There's no problem. The second stance that people are going to have after that is like, oh, but I'm not talking about creating demand for, that category. I'm talking about creating demand for my company. well, then you're not creating anything, are you? Because if people were already going to buy shampoo, then you have what's called a market share, and you can try and expand that market share through diverse activities, but that does not create demand. It doesn't change anything to the market. Because demand is what people want. I mean, it's what people need. It's the mix of needs and wants. And this is marketing 101. Like open marketing textbook, look at demand, and they tell you demand is needs plus want. Need and want. And some companies still haven't understood that these are two different things already.
Right.
Even if you identify a problem, that is a problem. People may not need a solution to that problem. They may want it, but they may not need it, or they may need it but not want it.
Right.
So it sits at the intersection of both. The only way to create demand is to create the need. If there is no need, people cannot want.
Yeah, absolutely. And so why do you think this term, two questions. I mean, if you looked on LinkedIn, there's probably a million people who have demand generation in their title. So why do you think this term took hold, and how do you think it affects people's marketing efforts?
So how it came in picture, I think. Well, I have a full. If people are interested in more detail about this, I have a full blog post that I think you read on our blog. Um, I think fundamentally this is pushed by agencies
Hmm.
who are trying to sell you something that you don't need and make or try to sell you the same thing, but they just rebrand it. So it's a marketing effort by agencies a lot of the time. Um, it would be easier for me to say I do demand generation, right? But everyone that I've seen say they do demand generation does not do demand generation. They do LinkedIn ads. Sorry. This is what they do usually. Um, so I think that's the reason. The other reason is just like if we're talking about B2B SaaS, it's a um it's a niche where people think that they are innovators, and some of
Right.
them are, some of them are not. And so they there is a hype cycle there, and so they got hyped by the new term. And after that, I've spoken to a lot of people who say, yes, I know demand generation sounds silly, but that's what people want, so that's what I say I do.
Right. Yeah.
And for marketers who are trying to get a job, I understand that.
Right.
I can't blame them. I totally understand that. So I think that's also why it changes. I mean, that's why it got traction.
I mean, that's an
To,
interesting perspective that you're saying about the agencies, and I mean, even probably people in marketing internally, but it does sound like there's some proactive method you could use to generate growth that's sort of a shortcut if you're saying demand generation. Like, I'm not gonna put all these tactics in place to capture the the demand for this product. I'm actually go create that demand. And so that would seem very appealing to people who are like
yeah.
shortcut growth.
Yeah, exactly. And then you give me the perfect transition to the second part of your question, which was how does that impact, people's marketing efforts? I think, and people are going to say I'm getting too philosophical because it's lead gen versus demand gen. It's a rabbit hole. We can talk about that for 3 hours and still have, we wouldn't have said everything there is to say. But because people think of it this way as a shortcut to growth rather than, having building good foundations to grow afterwards, when it stops working or when it doesn't work, they're puzzled. They go
Right,
like, but we were creating all that demand. What magically stopped us from being able to create that demand?
right,
If I take wood and I make furniture, the only reason for me not being able to build furniture is either I'm not there or there is no wood.
right,
Or there is no raw material, right? If you have that demand generation BS in your head, you're like, but we're doing the same thing. We're doing those LinkedIn ads. We're doing we ungated the content. We're doing content marketing. We're doing all the things that one puts under demand generation because no one uh, defines it the same, that puts people in the wrong mindset.
Right.
I have to say that I think demand generation did some good. I once said I think what works in demand gen is not demand gen. It's just the fact that companies stop trying to shove their products down people's throats,
Right.
and they start thinking about, oh, actually, what do these people want?
Right.
I think
Absolutely.
you can go a step further and understand just that marketing is thinking about how we're going to put products to the market. And so it has it has three components. It has the product, it has the market, and it has whoever has a product that is competing, which is the alternative, the competition. And
Mhm.
and that's it, right? And you need to take the three into account to build a marketing strategy.
Right.
What Dimension does is it takes the product and it goes like, oh, if we educate people around our product and why it is so great, then people will buy. And my
Right.
response to that is, yeah, I'm like you. I love being educated by strangers on the internet.
Um, that's great. That's great background. I mean, and I do think it's an important conversation. And you obviously have strong opinions and articulate opinions. Do you have, is there any, you and I talked earlier, there's a lot of, and I think this ties into your innovators discussion around marketing. Is there any other of these like three-letter acronyms in marketing that you have strong opinions on? You know, maybe it's product-led growth or account-based marketing.
Uh,
No.
I say the main issue that I find with all these things
Hmm.
is okay. Okay, I often quote this. There is a famous French poet from the 17th century called Boileau, and he wrote the poetic art, which is like a how do you write poetry in this
Okay.
very rigorous form, etc. And he has a line which is it could be translated as what is easily conceived is easily spoken.
Okay.
The reverse is like if I can't understand what you're saying, you probably can't understand either,
Right.
right? And I think this is the answer to your question. What
Mhm.
the fuck is account-based marketing?
Right.
And and I mean, yes, you can explain it to me, but why is it account-based? Or
Right.
other marketing actions not account-based?
Right.
And once you go deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper, it's like, yes, but our growth is product-led, it's not sales-led. Okay, so I give you a sales team and no product, and they sell anyway? Well, obviously no. So
Right.
what sense does it make? The issue is that people get used to this. And
Right.
I'm not against using these acronyms, and I understand people say this. People say this as a matter of uh, having a shortcut to say, we're not big on sales, we don't have a salesy mentality. Okay, good, fine. But the issue is people get used to it, and then they invent new things. And again, it's the agencies.
Right.
It's Mr. Big C always has every week a new thing like that to say. And now it's marketing influence revenue.
Right.
Oh, but look, we don't measure just revenue. We measure the right kind of revenue because we don't just do marketing. We do the right kind of marketing. And look at these peasants doing marketing that doesn't work. We do the kind that works.
Right.
And then I sit there and I say, well, wouldn't you put your website? Doesn't your website qualify as marketing? Like,
Right.
yeah, yeah. So if the prospects saw your website, they're influenced by your marketing. Well, kind of. So marketing influence revenue is all revenue because the prospect looked at your website one point or another. So you're just full of shit.
Right. No, I mean,
Well, it's not exactly that, because we measure the right stuff. Yes, but that doesn't make any sense. You just have to think about it for 30 seconds and it doesn't make sense.
right.
It does make sense for the guy who is selling it to you. That's
Right.
for sure. Because he says, I do the stuff that works. And I had these interactions on LinkedIn countless times where someone goes like, oh, how to write a content strategy that actually brings in revenue. I'm like, okay, good tips. How are you going to measure that this brings in revenue? Because we know content attribution is impossible. It's
Right.
not just hard, it's impossible.
Right.
Well, it's just like, oh, of course it's not going to be 100%. Okay, so it's not 100%. So how do you know it works better than the other stuff that people share? Well, yeah, you don't. You don't. But okay, that's that person's marketing. I understand. But no one buys it, right?
Right. And I think
And I think,
that's the
yeah, go ahead.
problem though, is that people hear these terms and who are probably just not as in depth on some of these topics like you are, but they're actually trying to do this in their day-to-day job. And they're like, why isn't
Mhm.
this working? It's like, I mean, product-led growth, no matter how you define it, I mean, it's requires, I mean, it should be a tactic and it requires a certain way of executing. But when you hear this, it's like summed up so neatly. It's like people try to implement this thing, they don't see the results, and it, I mean, really has negative effects. I mean, I think that's the same thing with demand generation. If
Yeah.
you are so narrow in your focus, you're missing the big picture and not be able to execute as well as you should.
Yeah. And if you look at it acutely enough, people always use the same examples.
Right,
So I'm an SEO guy, right? And people go like, "Oh, look at how Canva did this PLG SEO thing that is so clever." Well, first of all, it's not that clever. Every SEO would tell you this is the thing to do. We just don't have the resources. And
right,
if you look at the timeline, Canva had 100 million revenue when they started this shit. So your startup is not going to benefit from this, right? I mean, nuance is missing here.
right.
And I think the way I take issue with this is twofold. It's first, I think it fills people's head with nonsense,
Mhm.
and they're trying to apply this daily, and they fail daily. And that puts us marketers even deeper into this hole of BS and nonsensical
Right,
image that we have,
right,
right? Where people go like, "Oh, how to get buy-in from leadership and whatever." Well, stop BSing everyone. That's the first step,
right,
right? Appear as someone who's intelligent and not buying into the hype every other month.
right,
And the second thing is that most of these things are pushed by people who have something to sell to you.
right,
And when you buy it, and it works like every other thing, which means sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes it was a good idea and sometimes it wasn't, because if there was a way to take any company to $10 million in revenue per year, I wouldn't be talking to you. I would be using that
right,
way. Right. um when they do that, it becomes increasingly difficult for good marketing to be done and
Mhm.
for good marketing to be bought,
Right,
right? Because when I have a prospect in front of me, I don't say, "Oh, I'm going to switch your lead gen approach to demand gen, and we're going to help you kickstart that PLG growth so you can go, we'll put ABM." And it feels like I'm juxtaposing a lot of terms here, but read some stuff there. It's really that people are doing, right? Sometimes I don't even understand what's being said. I don't say that. I say, you know what? Marketing is very simple.
right,
You need to understand why people buy. You need to say it back to them everywhere they are.
mhm,
That's it. There's nothing more you need to do.
right,
But doing this is very, very hard,
mhm,
right? So it's like I also have this, if you're interested. It's a distinction between complexity and difficulty. People
okay,
confuse both. Some complexity refers to how intellectually challenging something is.
mhm,
And difficulty is how hard is it to execute. But it's not thinking versus doing. Okay, it's a little bit more nuanced than that. So, for example, building a nuclear power plant is both complex and hard. No, there are a lot of moving parts, and doing it is very hard.
right, right, mhm, right, 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 right,
Writing a bike is complex and easy. right? There are a lot of factors at play. Driving a manual transmission car is the same thing. The first time you drive a manual transmission car, your brain's overloaded. But if you get used to it, it's really simple.
Right.
Doing a pull-up is very simple, very hard. Like most people cannot do a pull-up, but
Mhm.
it's simple. You just, you pull. There's nothing. Doing a deadlift is the same. You just pull the barbell. Doing marketing is very simple, but very, very hard.
Yeah,
But people want you to think it's the opposite way. They
that's it.
tell you it's very complex because the difference is in the demand gen versus lead gen, the PLG versus sales-led growth, the ABM versus cold outreach. But that's not it. The
Right.
issue is none of these things matter as long as you figure out why people buy, where they hang out, and that you bombard them with your brand,
Right.
right? That's what marketing is. Yes, the intricacies are more complex. I mean, a little bit more complex, but roughly that's the thing.
Right.
And we have countless examples of that, of big consumer brands doing exactly that, running Super Bowl ads. Do you think people paying 8 million for 30 seconds are wondering about ROI? No, they understand that it's just like we need to put our brand in front of everyone.
Right. Right. No, that's great. I love that
But
actually.
all of this is very hard to do because if you say, do customer interviews, okay, where do I start?
Right.
How? What do I say? When do I speak? What kind of questions do I ask, etc.? Or build a strategy, right? Okay.
No,
And
it's
so the minute you understand this, I think it shifts your view on marketing dramatically.
right. Absolutely. What when you, and I'm sure you've probably touched upon some already, and I'm sure you have a lot of these. Is there anything that you found, especially with your background, this will be really interesting. Your answer will be very interesting. Is there anything that you found throughout your career that sort of went against what you would expect you'd read in a marketing textbook? You're in college, you sit down in your marketing 101 class, and you're like, this is how you market. Is there something that
Yeah.
goes against that conventional wisdom?
Are we talking only about marketing?
Oh, no, it could be anything.
So I say in marketing, one thing that has always puzzled me is why people won't show pricing.
Right.
That has, even when I was completely inexperienced, I was like, why wouldn't you show pricing? I was working with this like uh, B2B call center company, whatever. And I was like, but you need to tell people how much that costs because, oh, no, 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 we can't do that. I'm like, why? Well, because our competitor is going to know. Well, don't they already know? Because if they don't, they're probably out of business by then. Like, I mean,
Well,
um, that has completely puzzled me.
mhm.
And if you look at our website, our pricing is there. So I'm not saying you should tell them, yes, this is going to be, $257.97. I'm
Right.
saying, say it's going to be in the 200 to 300 range or something
Right.
so
Yeah.
that people can actually know what to expect. So that's one thing that I never understood. Another thing that kind of goes against conventional wisdom as well is I would talk about competition as much as I can
Hmm.
because that discussion is happening.
Right.
And I talk to so many companies where I say, do competitor pages, talk about the competition, talk about the state of the market, talk about where you're good and admit where you are not good, because that builds trust and honesty. And,
Right.
and people like that because that's an emotional connection to a brand. Um, and the pushback that I have is always, oh no, we can't do that legally. Oh no, we wouldn't want to talk about our competitors. I mean, that discussion's happening.
Right.
You have no control over the discussion happening. What you have control over is whether you want to be part of it or not.
Right. Yeah, that's great.
And you're choosing not to be a part of it. And I don't understand why.
Yeah, I think that's a terrific point. And honestly, I view it as like if you're selling a product and you think it's the best product, it's almost and you care about your consumer, you care about your prospects, it's almost your duty to be able to say like this is why our product is better. Like if you really care about your customer success, it's important to talk about these things. It's important to distinguish why
I
you're
I agree with that. And at the same time, I think people misunderstand and underestimate the repercussions that this kind of marketing can have on other people.
Right.
And I'm gonna exemplify here. There is a brand that does that really well, and it's called Close. It's a CRM for sales teams. I don't know what that means. The positioning's terrible. But they have comparison pages, and each comparison page reads two things. One, it reads like that, black on white.
Right.
Have you ever seen a comparison pages where the challenger comes on top of the company writing the comparison page?
Right.
And second, we are biased, not ignorant.
Right.
And I find that transparency so good. I'm like, and then the rest of the page is like, oh, in this situation, and you're comparing Pipedrive and Close. In this situation, you should go with Pipedrive because our product is not going to be a good fit for you.
Interesting.
And I'm like, and this comes before. This is where Close is good.
Right.
And that builds trust. Oh, they're telling me not to buy? Okay. Oh,
Right.
they're saying they're really good at this, right? I mean, if they told me that they weren't good at the other thing, it's probably true. I'll try it out.
Right. Right. Absolutely.
But you know what the good repercussions are? Is that I think this works on so many levels.
Hmm.
But the unseen repercussion is I'm talking to you about it.
Right.
And I've talked about Close for years to a very high number of people who weren't exposed to the brand.
Right.
So you can call that dark social if you want to look fancy. But the idea is they actually built an emotional connection with me.
Mhm.
You're going to go check them out. Some people who listen to this are going to go check them out. And they gained brand equity, brand recognition.
No, it's
I
yeah.
don't know if the product is good, but I have a positive impression of them. So
Right.
next year, when you're looking for a CRM for a client who wants to change, you go like on search and you go like Close. Oh,
Right.
I have a good feeling about these guys. I don't remember why.
Right. I'm gonna go check it out right after this.
So
Uh,
you see what I mean is when you go into this mindset of people first, yes, it can help you grow. Yes, it can help you with all the good KPIs and OKRs in your business. But there's also something more that comes out of it
right.
long term.
Yeah, absolutely. What I want to be mindful of your time. And so
Yeah, that's fine. I have a few more minutes.
okay, all right, terrific. Well, I feel like I have to ask you this question because it's the talk of the town right now. Any thoughts on AI and its effect on marketing?
I am puzzled by AI. Um, so I think the effect on content writing is going to be irrelevant. I
Hmm.
think it's mostly irrelevant for SEO purposes, I mean.
Hmm.
Um, on marketing as a whole, I don't know.
Right.
But based on everything that I said so far, I and this is I've had some discussions with people because I know people are building some of these tools.
Right.
Now AI is going to be able to run your LinkedIn campaigns better than that VA or junior level employee, right? That's for sure. So if you can't do stuff that AI can do,
Right.
if you can't do stuff that AI can't do, my brain is fried, I'm sorry.
No, no, no.
If you can only do the same things as AI, then yes, I would worry.
Yes.
Um, but at the same time, if you used AI, it's still kind of limited.
Yeah.
The prospects are really good,
Right.
but it's always like, I wish it could understand that. I wish it could
Right.
do this. I wish when I ask it to put an image without text, it would actually put it without text. It would put no
Right.
text in the image,
Exactly.
right?
Why can't I understand that? It's so
Um,
basic.
exactly. Will we get over that point? I have no idea. But and I'm not an AI expert or whatever. I have studied it a little bit, but it could very well be that we never get that, right? like we never will get a flying car, right?
Right.
We don't know whether it will cross that line or not.
Right.
But at the same time, there is a concept that's interesting. It's called regression to the mean. So what a regression to the mean is that there is a mean, an average in all of our performances. So if
Mhm.
you look at an athlete, and I know basketball a little bit, so LeBron has an 80-point game, then maybe the night after that he only scored 13, and you're like, well, I don't understand. He had an 80-point game last game. Why didn't he play so well all the time? Well, because it's a statistical error, variation. And LeBron has a mean, and if you look at basketball players, it's always their averages are not like, there's no player that was averaging 10 points a game and skyrockets to 50 points a game
Right.
the
Right.
next season. Everyone has their own thing.
Hmm.
Where that comes into play with AI is right now, companies do things a certain way.
Right.
AI comes in, and yes, you can use it for so many things, and it's a shortcut, and it's going to make you so much money. Okay, but regression to the mean is going to happen anyway.
Right.
Once the adoption reaches a certain level, then everything's going to go back to the pre-AI level. It's
Right.
not like every company is going to make 10 million more because OpenAI releases ChatGPT 5.
Right. 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 Yeah. Totally.
There will only be 10 spots in the Google search results. There will only be so many spots for ads. There will only be so much marketing budget,
Right.
right? So I don't see this changing marketing that much.
Hmm.
Actually, I see it changing marketing in the way that because the the entry ticket's lower now,
Right.
any brands that are more creative or that are capable of coming up with new things are going to have an edge. And all the brands that jump into the AI thing
Right.
are going to be bad. You see how people sometimes run ads. I'm a big believer in this. People sometimes run ads, and instead of having super great creative or whatever, they have this stick figures and whatever, and they have a very paint MS DOS looking thing.
Right. Yeah.
Um, and I think that works. It works because it's different.
Yeah.
And so yes, AI can make you have better graphics faster. Does it work better? Is it more effective? I don't know.
Right.
And this is a distinction that Dale, the guy who wrote the big viral post about demand generation, makes as well, and that companies fail to make is efficiency and effectiveness are two very different things.
Hmm.
And being efficient doesn't mean that you're effective.
Right. Right.
And with the AI thing, people are talking about efficiency. You get faster at doing the things you already do,
Right.
but that doesn't ensure anything you do is actually effective.
Right. You may be going faster in the wrong direction.
For example, and this is something when people ask me about search generative experience, SGE, I say basically the same thing, which is it's faster access to garbage.
Right.
Because if you think the problem with Google search is the speed at which you access the information, you've got it all wrong. But this
Right.
is what SGE fixes, and we come back to problem solution. It fixes the speed. Oh, I'm going to summarize the 10 first articles for you. Well,
Right.
it's the 10 articles that you were already summarizing and skipping because you knew it was garbage.
Right. Yeah.
Okay, I've got more garbage faster now. Okay, great. Does that change anything? No.
But I think you do raise a great point, though. I mean, regardless, ultimately, but you do know AI can do some things well. And I mean, for businesses and individuals. So you better be unique. You better do something that's meaningful. Like if you're just like
Yeah.
planning to spend the rest of your days just doing something that AI can do. I mean, you're not gonna be able to continue to do it. And so, I mean,
Yeah.
I appreciate you bringing fresh perspective on these things because I think this is what people need to do. Be creative, think outside the box.
And I think also there's something that people forget about is I use AI. I think ChatGPT is a really powerful tool, but it's a tool, right? You don't trail stuff with a motorcycle, right? Because it doesn't make sense, because it's not the right tool. Does it mean a motorcycle can't go fast and race and whatever? No, I mean, it's a great tool for that. But so you need to use the tool for what it's good for. And there are several times where, my brain is a little bit fried and I want to get inspiration. So I ask, I describe the situation, ask for 10, 20, I don't know, subject lines,
Right,
hooks
right,
for
right.
LinkedIn posts, whatever. And that helps me. I found really good stuff that I wouldn't have found anywhere else. But I, as a human being, have the experience to filter through the 95 or 98% bullshit that
Right,
the AI serves me.
right, right.
So if you use it without that, critical thinking, judgment on your end, in taking everything with a grain of salt mindset, and you just take everything as gospel, then yeah, you're gonna not be better than AI in the end.
Right, absolutely. Absolutely.
Which again comes back to marketing education, understand what's being said, critical thinking, understand when and how people are trying to BS you, and um and coming back to the fundamentals, which is what's the problem, what's the solution, how do we make the two, how do we bridge the gap between the two.
I like it. I like it, Vince. Well, Vince, thank you for your
By the
time.
way, I have
Oh,
to
yeah,
say
go
one last thing before
ahead.
you close out is, if you like that and it's convincing, everything I just said, as I did my work. This
Yeah,
is my messaging.
I like
If
that.
that is convincing, it's because I linked the problem, which is you don't know what you do to do with your marketing because your growth has plateaued. I have a diagnosis, I have proof of this diagnosis, and I have a solution, and I
Mhm.
have a story that links all this together. But this is not just me being super clever or whatever. It's me having done the work,
Right.
is what it is. Yeah.
All right. Well, that's
You can
terrific.
go ahead and close.
Definitely. I will definitely share links to your articles in the description here because I think you do have some really insightful stuff. So I definitely appreciate your time today, and I just look
Thank
forward
you.
to talking more with you and see what else you put out there. I really appreciate a fresh perspective from in the industry that we're in. Just too many people are following along. So whenever I see
Yeah.
someone saying something different in a well-researched, well-articulated way, I really do appreciate it. So thanks for your time today, Vince.
Thank you. Have a good one.
All right, perfect. Thank you.